Welcome to In Front of Ira.
We're Sabrina.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just
You're
looking
like,
back. I
wait,
was
so-
like, look, wait, is this working? Is it recording? So
Is it recording?
It's recording. I was literally
We're Sabrina and I forgot my own name.
I forgot my own name.
Anyway.
Hi, I'm the other one. Let's do this again.
Hello and welcome to BBC News.
News at 5. Welcome to In Front of Ira
We're Sabrina.
and Torsten
Two historians
and friends
and lovers.
of romantic comedies.
And this is the podcast in which we answer the age-old question,
Will they or won't they?
is this or isn't it a romantic comedy?
That is a really good question,
I
Sabrina.
wonder if
Shall
we're
we
going
get
to
into it?
Yes. We're talking about Imagine Me and You, which is also the indie rom-com, I'd say from 2005, written and directed by Ol Parker.
Mhm.
And yeah, it is, aside from Four Weddings and a Funeral, that also has a gay plotline. It is one of the first genuinely queer rom-com that we're discussing on this podcast, because overall there aren't that many genuinely queer rom-coms total.
This kind of has to do with the thing that we've talked about, kind of like the death of the rom-com, kind of coming...
And the homophobia thing, yeah.
Well, the homophobia, but like the moment that things open up, like that you have that queer like plotline in Four Weddings and a Funeral, in the 90s, you still get like a little bit of that, and then the rom-com as a
10
thing.
years where you could have made queer rom-coms then, if we count that moment. Like the Ellen thing happens in 1994.
Right, but that's what I mean. Like that's a thing that's a trajectory that they're not picking up on quickly. That's the whole like studio rom-com thing. That's why they're still not doing it. And then the moment that this comes along, which is 2005.
I mean, there's
it's
Nancy
almost the
Myers and Judd Apatow. There's a whole other wave of rom-coms at the time, and none of them are queer.
Is Judd Apatow rom-coms?
Yeah, Knocked Up, all of that stuff. I mean, there's definitely a bit of a renaissance in the early 2000s, and I think it really tapers off in the later 2000s and 2010s and it's not really recovered as a genre, and I think it's coming back right now. I mean, we talked about Hallmark, and Hallmark is starting to do queer Christmas films and queer rom-coms, which I think is an interesting development in terms of, again, like the diversity of Hallmark, but also maybe the sign that if we're actually getting back into the genre, we might also start to diversify the genre more significantly.
But that's exactly what I meant. You don't have the diversity in the genre before the genre kind of dies, and then it comes back now. And now we have like a whole different take on romantic comedy. Also, we have the very much same take in other storylines, but we have a much more expanded universe.
I think the only other, like, this is still indie, like the big gay studio rom-com that exists, and that's very recent, is Bros,
which I still haven't seen,
which we should do, because I liked it a lot better than a lot of people did. But anyway, so Imagine Me and You is also unique in that, because like even within a lot of queer film, to be fair, because one of the main characters is legitimately bisexual, which just doesn't happen. It's still something that doesn't even happen on TV all that much until the 2010s. 2015 is sort of a high point where there's a bunch of bisexual characters on TV finally, and it's sort of been that way for a few years, but it's not long. So the fact that in 2005 you have this movie where Piper Perabo is one of the female leads is legitimately bisexual, because the plot starts out with her wedding to Matthew Good, and they've obviously been together for a very long time. They're a very established couple. And we also get to know that they were friends first, so it's like friends to lovers. They clearly have a very harmonic, good relationship, like at least where the film starts, and it starts to obviously get rockier once, but And the thing that happens is that the florist at the wedding is Lena Headey, and interestingly enough, she hasn't actually met the couple. Apparently, her mother arranged for everything, which I think is sort of believable once you meet Piper Parabo's mother, played by Celia Imrie, who's very like controlling. But normally, I would say, well, the bride would have picked out her own flowers. But anyway, like this, she hasn't met the florist, and so she only meets her at her own wedding, and they lock eyes while she's literally walking down the aisle to her soon-to-be husband. And it's clearly that like thunderbolt lightning strike.
Which is sold really well. The kind of logistical question, since I am not a wedding flower expert, is the florist going to be like hanging around at the wedding after the flowers have all been delivered?
I mean, she says, like, I think I don't know. I don't think most florists do. I mean,
Florists, if you're out there, let us know.
I mean, it makes maybe sense because she has a very small business, so it feels like she's doing a lot of things herself and maybe is more hands-on in the way she does her job than others might be.
Around.
I mean, she said, like, she's at the actual ceremony, like, briefly, and then says, oh, all set up, so I'm gonna make sure everything is set up at the reception, which I guess makes sense. And it feels like she starts hanging around longer because she has that moment with the bride, and also because the bride's much younger sister, little H, takes a liking to her. So it feels like she maybe gets drawn into the wedding party more because of this. But I think it's not necessarily usual that the florist is even there.
All right. Yeah. Well.
Anyway.
Florist logistics.
That is
what
like,
you get here.
That is the immediate setup, is this love triangle, where we get the sense that Rachel has never been in love with another woman. Obviously, that is part of her like coming out story. Luz, the florist, is a lesbian, and is clearly like, living as such and like has lesbian friends. Her mother knows she's that's never in question, even though Hex, so her Rachel's husband, friend Cooper, wants to turn her, which obviously doesn't work, and it's very persistent.
Who feels like, and this is gonna add to my conviction about this rom-com. It's set in the For Weddings and a Funeral cinematic universe.
Yeah.
Like it fits right in terms of...
It's another wedding.
It's another wedding. It fits in the tonality a little bit. Although it kind of like goes, like it feels like it's not the same tonality. It is different in the way that it tackles its storyline, but it feels very much kind of that I guess coming from that place.
Yeah, and it definitely, I mean, there's also certain homage to it. Like, I feel like the wedding itself feels very like it could be one of Four Weddings and a Funeral, like slightly not that great a DJ, slightly awkward dancing, especially by Anthony Head, who, like, Anthony Head is a great addition to anything. Anthony Head has never been in anything where you were like, oh, Anthony Head, we didn't need him here. No. Like, Anthony Head, like, I mean, aside from obviously being Giles on Buffy, where everyone knows him from, but like every time he's popped up on something else, he was a delight. I mean, he's the only true villain on Ted Lasso, which I didn't see coming for him, but he's brilliant in it. Like, he also like adds so much to that. And he's
in this that British show where of these like middle-aged guys. It's like a whole comedy series where these middle-aged guys are basically doing things that 20-year-olds usually do, which is pretty funny.
He was in Merlin, which I haven't seen. The thing I've seen him in briefly was the way too short-lived musical comedy series Gallivant. That's very like Mel Brooks, and he's the father of Gallivant, who's like has like one big comedic moment, but it always works.
He's really funny in this.
He's really funny. He gets a lot of one-liners in this,
and he's kind of almost like cast as the comic relief, but also in the end like is kind of very essential. Kind of a really emotional moment. Like he's the rock that she can rely on. So he's well cast, and it's one of those people that you cast because you don't have to worry about things. Like he can do that. He can sell that. It's kind of like if you're casting, you're like, oh, okay, he said yes. Finally, let's just move on. Like and do everything else. Piper Perabo does the thing here that Gwyneth Paltrow can't pull off in Sliding Doors. She does a reasonably decent British accent. None of us here are British, so if you if you're kind of like have the ear, probably might not be convincing as much. It is definitely not as grating, and you buy it. Like I would buy it.
It's not Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, it's not Dick Van Dyke. Dick Van Dyke, although like kind of like Dick Van Dyke does the British accent like so badly that it is a choice. And then she does it so good that it's okay. It's
just like
Gwyneth Paltrow does it in like that in between like Uncanny Valley where it's like what is happening?
Is very deep. It's like enough for me to at some point have looked up, is she American, is she British? Because I did know her from like I watched her in this. It must have been around this film when this film came out. It came out in 2006 in Germany. I watched it on a DVD. I want to say in 2007 or so. So when I discovered this somehow, maybe just picking up the DVD. And I did know her from Coyote Ugly, which I think is the
only thing that I know.
And I've seen her in a bunch of TV. Like she's been in some TV that wasn't necessarily like very visible, but there was a show called Covert Affairs. She did much later in the 2000s that ran for several seasons. I think I've seen some of it. She's been on TV mostly after, and I think she's had a steady enough career. And then Lena Headey, obviously, at the time. I don't know what she did. I think she mostly did smaller things, and it took a while until Game of Thrones, of course, that sort of made her a global star, I think.
Which I'm forever like I feel like the gift that keeps on giving. If you like me have not seen Game of Thrones, you get to discover actors and then realize, oh, they have been in things, very successful things.
But I mean, it's definitely like that casting director found really good people. Some of which, I mean, Sela Imri, like she's one of those who's like always in things too. Mm-hmm. She also was in Best Exotic Marigold Hotel that Ol Parker did after this. She also briefly appears in Mamma Mia 2, which Ol Parker also did. So she works with him, but like she's one of those British actresses that somehow is in everything. She also has a she seems to pop up in things that have some kind of queer storyline, even though she's never at the center of it. So it feels like that. I don't know if that's a deliberate choice or because Ol Parker tends to write.
Maybe.
I don't know. But like, she seems to be.
Does she pop up in it because it's a choice, or is it kind of like if you're, if Aaron Sorkin gets you into things, like you're going to be in stuff where you talk really fast? So
I don't know. Matthew Good has also been in some queer things, even though here he's a straight character, but like. That always, like, I mean, there's certainly actors who are comfortable with this kind of content and want to champion this kind of content. Like, he was in A Single Man. Like, he's the lover that dies in A Single Man with Colin Firth. Like, Christopher Isherwood.
There's a lot of films from probably the 2000s to the 2010s that I just completely haven't seen.
But like anyway, I think it's a great cast. It's one of those casts where like every role seems the kid like the
We don't have the issue that we had for Weddings and a Funeral. The chemistry is believable between both of these pairings, which is really kind of like what sells you. Like because even before I knew where the story was going, because like I went in this completely cold. I didn't look up anything before, and I wrote down at some point, where is it? I like quote unquote flower girl. Okay, she's the love interest. It's like you're not even like, so before like it's clear where she's going, like, oh, she's compelling, she works. The person that didn't quite work for me was it Coop?
Yeah.
Because I think he's meant to be like he's a bit of an
male
ass.
insert of like, you're watching this movie and you're not fully convinced queer people are allowed to be happy.
And I feel like he's written like for someone like Hugh Grant who could have made that more charming. This way he's just an ass. Like,
yeah, I mean, he has his moments. I feel like he's sort of tonally shifting. I think he's too persistent and she's too forgiving with him being so persistent about wanting to quote unquote turn her. I think he gets more emotional moments of like actually caring about his best friend more than he lets on, where he confronts her. Because like, obviously, spoiler alert, like the plot is gonna go the way where they're obviously gonna cautiously explore the fact that they're in love with each other, which for Rachel obviously means, oh my god, I'm in love with a woman. What does that mean for myself as a person and for my sexuality? So there's the slightly awkward moment of like checking out gay porn, lesbian porn.
Which is the most 2005, was it Georgie's Bush? It's like clearly like a George Bush,
It's
like
oh, it's for heck, he's
American.
interested in American politics. But like it feels very true to that experience. And like I mean I have to say, like when I found this movie I was like 17ish and I was dating a girl at the time, and it was the first time I'd ever seen anyone like this is a thing, because you do have that moment. Like I mean it feels like the character has that moment. Obviously her sex life with her husband is starting to suffer also because it's sort of that emotional infidelity thing and she doesn't know what the fuck is going on with her. But it's probably also her just genuinely questioning her whole sexuality and identity. I definitely
think her
had that
life
moment
in general,
yeah. And like I had that moment where it was like, oh, I'm a lesbian now. And like, no, like I'm just not, because I'm clearly still attracted to men. It has not gone away just because I'm now attracted to a woman. But because bisexuality, I mean, again, it has thankfully changed. But I mean, there's still people who are like, oh, you're just like,
Which is
you're just
very
experimenting with a woman.
which is very much the kind of coming out of the 90s, like in the 90s when you see kind of gay and lesbian representation more at the same time. And there's like in Friends where you have that you have the lesbian wedding, and then you have like I think just a couple of episodes or seasons later there's Lisa Kudrow has like as Phoebe a song where she says like like sometimes men love women, sometimes men love men, and then there are bisexuals, but people say they're just kidding themselves. And that's kind of the that's kind of the level
and I mean that's the
that
thing.
you
Like
get in the 90s.
there's that term bi erasure that like hangs around for good reason, because the double, like there's a weird double stereotype of like bi women are just experimenting with girls and they will definitely end up just marrying a man anyway, and then they're straight again, quote unquote. And then there's the other flip side of it for men where it's like, oh, you're just gay, but you're not saying you're gay because it's easier, quote unquote, to be bisexual and just have sex with men and then also end up with a woman. Like it's always obviously about A, affirming heteronormativity, but also B, like, I mean, oh, women experimenting with women is attractive, like is something that straight men find sexually attractive, and like blah blah blah. Like
basically the Georgie's Bush porn. I don't think that was like meant for women.
Yeah, that's also what her facial expression. But that's the thing. Like if you start to look for lesbian porn, even now, the first thing will be for straight male consumption. So it's that thing, and it feels very true to her, just like starting to question everything, but then also obviously wanting to spend time with Luz anyway, because she wants to find this out about herself and what this means.
I think what really works about this being a not so much kind of like a movie of her just coming to terms with her sexuality. It's this idea of her having just made a huge life choice, and then this happens, right? It's like the most dramatic, right? It's the most dramatic way of doing it that you can possibly do it, and the movie really explores that. And I think that's really why also structurally and like story wise this really works, because it's not a slow kind of I guess I'm not going to marry him then. It's like this just happened, like literally just happened. And now what has happened?
I mean, I don't know how old they are. I want to say late 20s. Sort of late 20s, and it makes sense for them to get
early 30. I mean, there's a line where Coop says I'm 29 years old, and then Heck says you're 31.
Feels like at that precipice,
so like right
people
there
would make that decision of finally getting married. Especially again, they were friends, they became lovers. They have obviously, I mean, there's even a line that says, "Oh, they're finally getting married." So it feels like they've probably dated all of their 20s, and it's now that moment where they're like, "Okay, let's tie the knot, let's get married." But it's fully believable that someone who spent all of her 20s in a heterosexual monogamous relationship would have not otherwise explored. I mean, so many people don't. So it just makes that very believable. And I think also that it's also not just a coming out story, because we also have that as lesbian established character who's just a lesbian will always be a lesbian. And her world also feels believable. Like we don't see her as much in like queer spaces, but we do get that sense of her having the community because he has her friend Edie, who is just a friend who's also very much a lesbian, and wants to take her out to something, and she always declines, and she just doesn't want to date, and she's like, no, she doesn't feel like going out and dating, and she has her job, and she's fine.
So there are a few things that I think we need to talk about, and one of them we need to talk about is the strangest flower shop in the history of movies.
The running gag. I mean, I can see that. I mean, I haven't talked to people with flower shops, but people coming in
with
wanting flowers for the
yeah.
weirdest occasions.
Like the way that it starts off is like somebody. It's a woman coming in and she wants, I want something that says, I'm sorry he's dead, but not that sorry. He was just a dog and you shouldn't have loved him more than me, which is a lot to expect from a flower shop.
Where the guy wants to break up but doesn't even want to pay for a whole bunch of flowers, just like one. And then the girl who wants to tell her boyfriend that she's pregnant and then starts sobbing because she's afraid he will react negatively.
It just continues sobbing, which is kind of almost like a Nancy Meyers like extended sob scene. And the guy who ends up with the cactus. Like it's a nice like
very phallic
idea for kind of like getting some comic relief in. Which is, we're gonna get to this in our ending kind of like, is this romantic comedy? Because like it wasn't very funny.
Yeah, it's
and
not.
It just has that, it has Anthony Head as the comic relief and it has the weirdos in the flower shop. And otherwise, like to me, it's just played very much like a romance. Like this is
because it's again, it's like high stakes. This is like people who are like finally really kicking off their life together and making these like
it's not
milestone life decisions you're supposed to make in your late 20s, early 30s.
Like if you laugh this off, you're gonna go wrong.
Yeah, no, you need to like, the humor is elsewhere, and that's fine, I think. And what's also important, I think, is that like you need to root for these two women to get together, despite the fact that you actually also need to like Heck. Like you need to like him and you need to like them together. And that makes it inherently tragic because you know that by the end of the film,
one of them is
gonna get hurt, and it's obviously must be him. Maybe it mustn't be like, but like in the logic of like they have love at first sight, and they have that whole line about the immovable object and the unstoppable force. So he will have to move, and he does that. I mean, it's not even her who wants to break up with him. She's like, "This will be fine. Like we can. I don't want to hurt you. We can go on with our lives." But he's like, "No. Like I don't want to go live this life."
No, because
now.
like this is also right. It is her story, but it is him also realizing this is our marriage, and like if you're settling for me, then I'm not gonna be happy either.
And I think what's something that I don't know if it's as clear as you watch it for the first time, but watching it multiple times, he has his own legitimate story arc of being a guy who always plays it safe, who never takes any risks, who just, always goes with the safe option, which would be like the romance he's had for the longest time, getting married at the right age, quote unquote. The fact that he has the stockbroker job that he obviously hates and keeps talking about quitting. We get the sense of like he's not really lived his life either because they have only been together, and he hasn't traveled. Like he wants to write this travel book, and he's like, oh, maybe someday, but like he's had these other priorities.
And I mean, I watched it the first time yesterday, and that's very cool. Like his storyline is also very cool.
And the fact that he has fear of public speaking at his own wedding, and it's just this very timid guy who never takes the big steps and the big risks. And it's actually his development of like stepping up for himself, but also like trying to do right by her by saying, I don't want to be in this relationship if you're not 100% in it, but I don't think you should be either.
And it's interesting because I was reading a bunch of reviews, and I read the Roger Ebert review.
Yeah, I'm mad at him.
Which I like. It's one of the few where I think he's just completely off the mark, because to him it's tropey and it's nothing special, and it doesn't work.
It's not for you, Roger.
It's not for you. Although I have like there are what is the one with who's the main guy in How I Met Your Mother?
Josh Radnor.
And Elizabeth Olsen.
I still haven't seen it, yeah.
And he loved that movie, and I watched it, and I'm like, I love these people. These are great people. Everything, like, and I did not like that movie at all. So I like know Roger Ebert sometimes has like this is for me. That's why, like, Roger Ebert's
it's like, you're an old white man. You don't understand that queer people don't get these kinds of stories. Queer people are allowed to, for once, get the tropey rom-com, and this is part of the appeal. But I also don't even think, like, of course it's tropes, but again, certain tropes have to, like, make the genre. Every genre is made up of tropes.
That's the other thing, yeah.
Is not the problem. And I think it does well because A, it's queer, B, the performances are good. I think it's a good script. It also has a clear like structure. It's, you know, that one of them will have to move, which is set up in the first scene, and this is where it's gonna go.
And it's pretty classic in terms of structure, and also in terms of, you know, what it harkens back to, because it harkens back to like not just Jane Austen, but like the Jane Austen, like romance, like the way that it's filmed, like all these meetings in parks and the long and stuff, like they're very deliberate about that. And it really, it's again, like the thing that I can appreciate about, we talked about this when we talked about Hallmark, we talked about this when we talked about Four Weddings, and we talked about Love Actually. To me, what I appreciate is when a movie is well constructed, and then you can, because then at least you get your basics right, and then whether it works for you or it doesn't work, that's another thing. But like I appreciate it when you know, when they are doing the things that they should be doing, and then take off on that and add something on top of it, instead of going like, oh, we're going to do this and we're also going to reinvent the genre, and we're also like, if you're trying to do too much, it's not going to work. No. So this needs to be pretty much caught within the structure of the genre in order to do what it does, which is the queer storyline, which wasn't that present before.
And I think what's interesting, I don't know if that's even true, but on IMDb in like the trivia, it says something like this was originally conceived as a straight storyline. And I think had it been a straight one, it would have been incredibly, like, way more tried. It might have been a fine film because it's funny enough, but like you would lose so much of like why anyone would seek this out.
I actually think it would have been more tragic, because like her, like the fact that she's understanding a part about herself, which is her sexuality, makes this something that it's fine for her in the end than to leave him, much more than if there's another guy.
Yeah.
Like that's a thing that's been done that would have been much, like you said, trite, or that would not have worked for me.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it would have worked for me.
It's important that this is part of the storyline, and I mean, again, like in terms of like chemistry being the important thing, they have chemistry. I think her and his chemistry is more clearly that like lived in, that they're very believable as some people who have know each other well enough together.
He is from the moment, from jump, he is the boyfriend she's not supposed to be with TM. Like, it's very clear. But also he's not unlikable. Yeah, no. he's the Patrick Dempsey from Sweet Home Alabama.
Well, he's like, in terms of type, he's definitely more the Hugh Grant-ish, but like,
this is my thing about this movie. I feel like every second character could have been Hugh Grant in this. It's kind of like in that, like, that's what I said, like the Four Weddings cinematic universe. There's like, he is this supposedly like charming kind of, like Hugh Grant as like the, you know, like 10, 15 years early as like the young stock, like that would have completely worked. Yeah, he's that type.
And I mean, Piper Perabo and Lena Headey's chemistry is amazing. Like, that just sells it. Like, you need to believe that they like A, want a bone, and B, just like they have this connection.
And you have that, and in a movie that posits that love at first sight is really important, which this does, which Lena Headey,
they have that dinner discussion.
Dinner discussion. That needs to be visible, and it needs to be understandable. And that first scene in the church, it's right. It's there. Yeah. It's right there, and that's the chemistry of the acting. That's the way that it's written. That's the way it's directed. I mean, like, that's the other thing. Like, it needs to sell that moment, and it does.
There's like slow motion moment, and then it continues.
And again, like that, it may be a little bit tropey. It may be a little bit done before, but it really does
You
what
know
it
what's
needs to
happening
do.
when you see it.
And you believe it. That's the other thing, because like if the chemistry doesn't work and you do this, then you're like, okay, fine, we're doing this.
And then they meet again at the wedding reception, and obviously also great symbolism. Her wedding ring has slid off her finger and has landed in the punch bowl, and then like she has to get it out, and it's kind of cute. And like they have that moment of like there's annoying wedding guests, namely Heck's asshole boss, and like they have their thing, and it just continues and they keep hanging out. And I mean, I think what's also great about this is that, like, yes, of course she wants to get close to her, but she's also not pushing it. She's not intentionally wanting to cheat on her husband. Like, she's not seeking out, like, she's not sleeping with her. Like, she's not going out on like secret clandestine
That's the thing that
trysts.
That's the thing that made it feel very Jane Austen to me, in the sense that these people, like, because the whole thing of Jane Austen is, there are these structures, there's expectations, there's what society wants from you, and how do you deal with all of that, and also with then like becoming yourself, and it's exactly that. She's like, okay, no, I cannot do this. This is not what one does. This is not what a good person does. And like she kind of like, then the way that they really get together is almost by accident, when 2005, like when
she calls
when Rachel
her.
calls her, then hangs up again, and somehow has forgotten that it's 2005 and you can just call back. And so Lena Headey calls back, but then gets Heck, who says, "Oh, good, I'm talking to you. I have this like
work thing,
football,
and so,
like take her to go
like
see the
work
football
thing.
game."
Can you take my wife to go see the football with her?
Which wouldn't have happened had he not.
Yeah,
like,
and then it turns out they spend this whole evening together. They go to like the Dance Revolution thing. It's really cute. And then at the end, it turns out there was actually Luz's birthday as well. So they spent the birthday together, and then they almost kiss. And then it's sort of like at that point it's clear.
Which I wrote down because like there was a car driving by and you see the car headlights, and that's why they go apart. I'm like, see, this is why we need car-free cities. We would have had a much better
I think they would have gone
chance.
like she's also stopping herself. Like it's not just being seen; it's also just like having that moment.
I liked the thing, the football game, because it becomes important later on, because she teaches Luz teaches Rachel how to project, which is of course a nice little scene because they're like touching and like getting close to each other, but also because that comes back in the end when she calls out, like her basically running to the airport scene is like they're stuck
in
which
traffic.
feels very Notting Hill, and like very like again and then she projects, and that's why she hears her. The thing that would have made that scene better for me was if they also would have done the wave, like in When Harry Met Sally, because
you don't do the wave in football.
I know.
But I think it's like inherently like romantic to scream "You're a wanker, number 9" across the field. But yeah, it's fun. And yeah, it's it's also like that little like slice of like British culture that's in there of like they're going to see the football and she's gonna be like shouting abuse at the players, even though she's like a tiny blonde woman, which feels very true to being in an English football space.
And then the dancing like arcade thing where I'm pretty sure Piper Perabo got to recycle some moves from
but yeah, I mean that's just again, like, I mean, it works. It's just a film with a very clear storyline. It's not groundbreaking, but it's just like, it's groundbreaking because it's queer. Like, the story on itself
and it does that, and I think that's exactly what I mean. Like, it does that thing. It knows what its important contribution is, and it doesn't kind of go off in different directions.
And the supporting cast is great, so you get that feeling of like this is an established
just like
world.
Even if you want nothing to do with any other actors in this movie, just like the scenes of the supporting cast are brilliant. Like Anthony Head is great, Celia Imrie is great in it. The guy who plays Coop is maybe not.
I mean, it's not his acting. He's a good, like, he's
but he's
that
not
sort
he's
of
not,
charming asshole character. He's fine. I mean, the only thing that's trope is like the two best friends that don't have names and work with her and like are her bridesmaids, but like we don't know about them anything. Like they pop up whenever she's like slowly trying to figure out if other women also feel this way.
And kind of like,
does this mean I'm gay when I want to kiss another woman? What does this actually? Have you ever made out with another woman?
they're not just nameless. They're like literally out of focus. They are so unimportant that there's this big scene where she's kind of like talking to herself about almost kind of like the
you just need like, she's talking to herself, but you
and
just
they're like
need to
out of focus in the background. Yeah,
you
like
just need to externalize her internal monologue, which is talking to her like friends.
Which is interesting because like, and I'm wondering if, you know, having more of a, if she had more of a kind of a best friend who like actually gives her input into things, if this would have, because the storyline is mostly about her motivations, and then it's about what she does, and then in the end what Heck does when he realizes that she doesn't really want to be with him.
What's in a way is interesting is that these are not teenagers; these are like adults at like age 30-ish. And the parents play a significant role in their lives, which isn't always the case. Like, are there any parents and for weddings and a funeral, even though like people get married, you know, like, and it's interesting that choice was made. I think this is probably why they didn't then also introduce even more friends. I think obviously with Coopy's there, I think they probably just didn't want to introduce another like female friend because it's A, screen time, B, you have Luz, you have her friend meetings are with her eventual love interest. You have sort of that space, and everything else is just her externalizing her internal monologue and like having this overbearing mother come in, and then the contrast of like Luz's mom, who's like divorced and depressed, and she's trying to get her to like go out. And
who is actually a really interesting character because she is unlikable, but she is.
How's she unlikable?
She isn't.
She's just depressed.
No, Luz's mom. Sorry, no, Rachel's mom. Yeah,
Rachel's mom.
She's unlikable, but you kind of understand. Like that's a thing that because like it's easy to write an unlikable character, but to have one that is understandable why she is still, you know, why Anthony Head is with her.
I mean, that's
like
that sort of almost second romance plotline with the parents. It's just there. Their marriage is obviously very rocky, and they're very mean to each other the whole time. And they sort of get closer to each other again because their daughter is like doing this big romantic gesture, and they talk, and her father is so supportive of it, and they make that little agreement of like, maybe you could be nicer, and I could take Viagra, and then we could have sex again, which is literally. This should be
kind of like the mission statement of our podcast. The grand romantic gesture makes everyone's life better.
Yeah, but it's that thing. It's like. And they work, and then the other side you have the single mother who's like very supportive the whole time, but is struggling herself to get her life back on track, and then she does because that also develops, and they sort of switch roles momentarily when Luz is very distraught about everything that has happened, and her mom is starting to go out again, and I think they sort of inspire each other, and it's sort of seesaw, and then hand over the flower shop to a random, like this flower shop.
Again, this flower shop that it's making any money is a miracle.
But no, I mean, I think that's the film. I think it's interesting looking at the reviews again, sort of Roger Ebert being a bit of mark because he doesn't understand this movie is not for him apparently, which, you know, he's very old at that point. The film apparently in the US has an R rating, which enraged me because queer films have a history of having an R rating, even if they just have one gay kiss. He notes in a review that it's apparently more than one fuck, but I can tell you the way these like MPAA ratings usually work is that queer content always, like there's nothing. You have one gay kiss scene and it ends up being R-rated, even if there's no swearing in the movie, if there's no other explicitly sexual thing. And that obviously always hurts box office, because if no teenagers can go out and see this, you're fucked. Like, and there's also adults in the US who choose like not to look at it. Less cinemas, I think, do.
There's
pick
a
them
whole
up,
thing that
like,
I think
we
can get into like movie ratings and what they have meant for certain genres across time and how they felt so changed, because like once the X rating goes away and NC-17 or like all of the changes which are to the rating system, but then also to the way that the rating is actually like filled with content, like where you're like, okay, R rating means restricted, but also that means different things at different times, like all of the other ratings as well. And PG is kind of like the most malleable of them, because it also then like we'd probably get into a discussion of that whole system and what that means for the movies that we watch at some point.
I don't know how much more is there to say. There's unfortunately not that much you can find about the movie, simply because it's an indie that like also then didn't have the massive success that it maybe should have had. But it's a fine film. I do like all Parker's work generally. Like I said, he went to do Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Very recently, he also did Ticket to Paradise with Julia Roberts and George Clooney.
That's the one
so he's one of the only big studio rom-coms of the recent years. Unfortunately, it was sort of middling. I really, really, really wanted to love it. I went to see it in the theater. I really, really wanted to love it because it's, Julia Roberts and George Clooney and Ol Parker. I don't know. It's obviously not the lack of chemistry between these two, because those two have amazing chemistry. I don't know. The script felt sort of middling there, but we can maybe do that at some point, look at that. But generally, I do like his work. My personal trivia about him is that, like, at some point, when I, for the, I don't know, millionth time watched the film, like, I tagged him on Twitter and then ended up having a DM conversation with him where it was like, this was really formative for me because it's the first bisexual character I've ever seen, and it means a lot to me. And he was like, thank you, and it's like great that it meant a lot to you. He ended up randomly sending me a copy of the second Mamma Mia movie, or like his assistant did. Like they had some giveaway, and it ended up being one of the people, because he's like a small Twitter account that had like 100 followers. Like he's yeah. And the other trivia is he's one of Jason Isaac's best friends, and which I found out because they interviewed each other at some point. And I've talked to Jason Isaacs about it, and they're really good friends. And he's married to Tandy Wynn Newton, or I think they just separated. But so like he's connected to a lot of other people in the British film industry.
Which I suppose if you are in the British film industry is just kind of automatic.
Yeah, but also some of it's just also very like personal relationships before any of them got very successful. Like him and Jason Isaacs have been friends for ages, and but yeah.
Yeah, I keep there's a couple of things that I thought we should mention. Some things that I just noticed that I thought were kind of nice. I kept seeing them reading newspapers in bed and going like, oh, 2005. I guess there's a certain kind of like I guess like it's a low speed kind of like comfortable hanging out in bed that you're not going to do with smartphones. I
mean, you sort of do. It's less the passing back and forth, but like reading tweets to each other, and like cool.
It feels a little different. The thing that I really liked is when Luz at some point comes to Rachel's to the school, and there's this kid giving a presentation.
His sister,
yeah, and that was H giving the presentation. Yeah. Okay,
that's why she's there, because H befriends her, and that's just why Luz even gets invited to the school presentation. That otherwise would
like I need signposting everywhere. And
they say it in the scene. And it's
you assume that every single word that gets uttered in a movie
but I mean,
hear
it's the
and
kid
recognize.
You've seen in 3 other scenes doing.
Look, if you've seen the movie before, you watch it differently than when you watch it the first time.
Got that on the first. Yeah. Anyway.
And she says space is many light years away, and I just love that line. Like it's.
I mean, she has a few other cute lines where she's also like, where Luz is explaining to her that she will be with someone for the rest of her life, or thinks that she will be, but it will be a woman. And she's like, oh yeah, I get that. Like, I also want to be with my best friend so and so. Doesn't mean I'm a lesbian though. It does. You're a lesbian though. It's like, it kind of does. But
she also comes back in the scene where Heck then stands on the roof, and then she offers him like like sweets, and because she doesn't know what he likes, he bought him a
And she
mix. So
clearly
she's
has a
really,
crush on Heck.
yeah.
Like she's a kid.
She is a non-annoying kid, because there are two kids in movies, the great ones and the annoying ones, and the annoying ones are usually just badly written.
Yeah.
So she's written like an actual human person, which helps.
She's clearly like wise beyond her years kind of thing. Which is a trope, obviously, but it also feels true of someone who was born to a mother who was very old at that point, and a sister who's almost 30, and like
Yeah, I don't really feel like she's that wise beyond her years. I mean,
no, but she's clearly sort of like
she's just not a stupid kid, and I appreciate that in movies.
Yeah, she's
because
and she clearly has a crush on Hank and seeks him out and consoles him.
The thing that I thought was a very interesting choice is the very last scene with Heck when he gets on the plane, which is also a really funny scene.
It's his little meet cute with the woman who sits next to him on the plane.
Yeah, who when he says he's writing a book, she says, "Great, I can read."
That's where you grab
perfect.
It's like
perfect. But that is the weird thing about that is like he turns to camera, he breaks the fourth wall, like literally in like the end of the movie. Like it's a weird little moment, and I kind of wonder if that was meant in the script. I feel like that just felt a little bit strange.
I think it's scripted. It's sort of probably sort of nodding at the audience of like, yes, we're also giving him his little,
because like I think this is kind of coming back to me saying before, like if this had been a heterosexual storyline, it would have been much more kind of like tragic and tropey, because he does, the quote unquote right thing, and then you still feel like you feel bad for him, but you still kind of need to see that his life is also getting back on track.
In so many ways, it's also that classic storyline of like he too needs to come into his own, which he does. But like, yes, I do want to travel. I want to quit the horrible job I have. And I want to write this book, and I will finally do that. And when he makes all these decisions for himself, and crucially, like breaking up is for himself as much as it is for her, because he loves her, but it is also for himself because he doesn't want to get stuck in the situation where he's not, is with someone who doesn't feel the same way about him. And as soon as he takes those steps, he meets someone who might or may not be, but clearly immediately something happens for him that's like way more exciting, because they clearly never had that little, like him and Rachel never had the word love at first sight, because they had that slowly developing.
Which I think is actually really interesting, the way that this is framed kind of towards the middle of the movie, when Heck talks about like, oh yeah, maybe it can be like before, and just kind of that the baseline is not the great love story. The baseline is, I guess it's all right, and both of them end up escaping that.
It's again that like the heroes have to like sort through their issues, and in her case it's figuring out she's bi, and it's that is important, and she would have figured that out at some point in her life, and this is maybe the worst moment, but maybe also the best moment.
Again, it's not just that, and as much as that is important to her journey, it's that she's not meant to be with this person. Like,
and also maybe not in this life. That is not, I mean, she's clearly in a like it looks like she's in a monogamous relationship with after, but I feel like that is her, like I think that is the opposite journey of like they're both entering this very traditional heterosexual relationship.
That's the Jane Austen of it all.
And both of them don't want that in that way, because for him it means not being able to live his life either, and once they get out of that, they wish each other well. I mean, I would also like to think that they remain at least friendly, like once the hurt has passed, because clearly they've now realized that this is like, and even if they don't, but like it at least feels like that is the way, like there might not be hard feelings anymore at some point, because they're both going on different paths that are maybe better for them than they were before. It clearly should.
Which is also, I mean, it is important that they both have character development, because very often the character development is, the boyfriend she's not supposed to be with usually doesn't have character development. Yeah,
and I think that's the thing. This film has three leads. It doesn't have two. It's always about how all three of them relate to each other. This is also why we get Heck interacting with Luz. Like they have some moments just to themselves. Like she's the one who asks him about like the travel book he wants to write very early on, and he's the one who figures out she's a lesbian before Rachel even does, and he is the one who sets them up on the well done, and also comes into the flower shop, which is obviously heartbreaking because that's the first time they really like kiss, and they're in the back of the flower shop, and then Heck walks in trying to buy flowers for his wife. But they also have that moment, and he clearly also trusts her as a friend. Is like, have you noticed anything about Rachel? And
which obviously is it's tragic. There, no, so it is, and I looked up the German title, which is not great, but it's Hochzeit zu dritt, but pointing exactly like it's about the three of them, and it's
you should translate that because not everyone listening speaks German. It means a wedding for three,
basically.
Which I guess is
that's another
Mitt Romney approves. I don't know. But I mean polyamory for the win. But I mean, at least for once, like normally watching love triangles on TV and everything, like so often love triangles, I want them, every problem would be solved. It would just have polyamory, and in this case I don't even want that. In this case it makes way more sense for this to end up this way, but there's too many love triangles where I wish like, oh come on people, like especially long developing TV love triangles, but like this one is like, no, this is fine, let them be together and let him explore and then live his life because he's a guy. And we haven't talked about the best scene yet, where she's trying to, like, Rachel's trying to rekindle her sex life with her husband. And it's like, remember when we hooked up on Hampstead Heath?
Oh, God, yeah. Why do we not? Oh, my God, yes.
And they go, like, lay down. He's like, oh, why are we doing this? We have an apartment now. We don't have to, like, sneak around from your mother anymore. Yeah. And then have sex in the woods, in the park. And then they do this and they run into two gay men who just met this night, so I guess it's a gay cruising spot. Let's call it what it is. And then have that very awkward British. It's like, oh, hello, they shake hands, and it's just very cute as well.
And it's the formality of it that makes it pretty funny. Just the way that it's tackled. And kind of like the contrast of they just met that night and they're trying to do it to spice up their like 15-year love life that's not working.
And I mean, you like if the rest of the movie didn't exist the same way and you just had that randomly in a straight film, you would be like, oh, what a gay trope, why is that there? But in this context, it obviously also makes a lot of sense because it's just like, yes, more queer people exist in this universe, and it's also just like that little awkward like. So funny.
And the whole thing, we have an apartment now. I'm like, yeah, I guess I get that. It's like, you want to be comfortable.
Yeah. I don't know what else I have there. Aren't any like official taglines? This is one of those where we stopped doing taglines in the 2000s. I just have my own. So if you want to jump to that. What is your fake tagline?
My fake tagline is, I'm just stealing one of the funny lines from the movie, which is, love the smell of hot dogs in the evening. Smells like hot dog.
Anthony had. Mine is, people are bisexual, Cooper. I mean, to be fair, he's always arguing with Bruce about like, no, she's a lesbian, but like it's obviously a larger comment on like, yes, bisexuality exists. That is a valid, stable identity. Everyone, thank you very much. Because
which actually, like, if she was, he wouldn't have to do any convincing. I mean, probably just because he's an ass.
No, but I mean, just inserting him because that's meme of like people are gay, Stephen. Which if you've been online, you know, but like people are bi, Cooper. Yeah. And I mean, again, I will forever be grateful that film doesn't mess with it. She doesn't suddenly turn into a lesbian. She's even trying to rekindle her sex life with her husband. So clearly she is bisexual. And it's a cute film.
Yeah. It's a good film, and I'm glad to watch it because I can see.